All right, Alexander, let's discuss Mr. Durham. He is he has become the man of DC at this moment. Everyone is talking about Durham, it seems. And let's also talk about Adam Schiff, because Adam Schiff, who was I would say, the most prominent Democrat pushing the Russiagate, Steele Dossier fiction and hoax, is now trying to distance himself from it. And he's just trying to be like, oh, well, the Steele Dossier was kind of, I was a little iffy about it. And, we were just trying to do our job. And I'm paraphrasing everything, but he's trying to weasel his way out of this because he knows that the whole house of cards is crumbling around him and that Durham is getting very, very close to the Clinton epicenter. Once again, not the Obama epicenter, not the Comey epicenter or the Mifsud. He is focusing in at this moment, from what we know, on the Clinton epicenter. So what do you make of, number one, Durham and his recent popularity in DC, the United States, and the world, really? And more importantly, Adam Schiff and the way he is trying to weasel his way out of this. Boy, does this really make my blood boil when I see Adam Schiff trying to just, dismiss the whole Russiagate controversy that he was stoking up to begin with.
Absolutely. Now, let's first of all talk about Durham, because one of the most fascinating things is to see and to watch the way in which, over the last couple of days, since that third indictment came out last week, Durham has gone from being zero to hero. I mean, we're all joking and talking about the invisible man, the invisible investigation, and suddenly he produces two actually very well drafted, very thorough, very methodical indictments, once against Michael Sussman over the Alpha Bank affair. Now this absolute, whammer of an indictment against Igor Danchenko. By the way, I should say, reading these indictments, they are very, very different in style and in substance from those that Mueller used to issue. These are much more factual. They don't engage in morality language. They are actually proper indictments. But suddenly, Durham is become, the hero that everybody is saying, or, somebody that everybody is scared of. I do want to add a word of caution. Everything from these two indictments, and as I said, these are excellent indictments. They're well drafted, they're well constructed, they're thorough, they're well put together, they're written in measured, objective legal language. Everything does suggest a methodical, systematic, and careful investigator. And that does make one hope that this is a serious investigation that is going to lead somewhere. But it's important to say at the moment that that is only supposition. We don't know how far Durham is going to take this. Jonathan Turley made the absolutely correct point that Danchenko doesn't look like the ultimate defendant in all of this. He looks like a small brick, and, the whole thing is being built up. And it looks like, if you read the indictments, that Durham is indeed building up a case that is going to take very far. But that's not something we know. That's something which, when we read the indictments and the way they're constructed, that's what we think. Now, I just say that because, we've had so many disappointments over the course of this Russiagate affair. We've had so many moments when it looked, to me at least, as if the whole thing just couldn't survive because of its own inherent absurdity, and it did survive. We've had so little reason to think that this Durham investigation was going to work. I think that one word of caution about Durham himself is necessary. I believe, I hope all the indications are that this is a full investigation. But let's not, put him on a pedestal and all say this is going to be the great, investigation, the great revelation. Quite yet. He hasn't yet indicted any of the big players. That's the important thing to say. Now, let's turn now to Adam Schiff. Adam Schiff now says that, there was no real reason to doubt the Steele dossier, that the Steele dossier, well, at the end of the day, it perhaps didn't matter that much, that the fact that all these people were convicted by Mueller of process crimes, of lying to the FBI, well, that shows how important this was, that, this isn't really the central issue. This is absolute nonsense by Adam Schiff. And can I just say, Adam Schiff is a lawyer. Adam Schiff is somebody who has set himself out as understanding evidence. Adam Schiff, throughout Russiagate, the first part of Russiagate, was the vice chair of the House Intelligence Committee, very senior position, gets access to intelligence information. Adam Schiff is now the chair of the House Intelligence Committee. I happen to know that there is, within the archive of the House Intelligence Committee, a report that was commissioned by Nunes, the previous Republican chair, which actually went into enormous detail about how the whole Russiagate thing was fabricated. And I understand that that report contains much of the information that we're now seeing dribbling out through Durham's indictments. And Schiff, as chair of the committee, has arranged for that report to be locked away in a safe. So, he is not an innocent party. He was certainly no sort of dupe. On the contrary, he was the lead prosecutor, if you like, throughout the Russiagate affair. He read the Steele dossier into the congressional record. He spread stories saying that the Steele dossier provided the frame narrative for the whole investigation. I can remember that. I can remember reading pieces about all of this in the BBC, and it was clear to me that they originated from Adam Schiff. And as many people know, or let's say believe, Adam Schiff was the source, or his staff were the source, for many of the leaks that kept Russiagate going through all those years when it was chuntering along. Last but not least, those who have the kind of memory of Russiagate that, the two of us do, will remember the Battle of the Memos, when Nunes came along and prepared that incredible memo about Steele's dossier, in which he absolutely panned the dossier. He said the whole thing was absolute nonsense. We did articles about this at the time when Nunes' dossier was appearing. Schiff published a counter memo. He actually attempted to rebut the Nunes memo, and he spread stories about Nunes, as we both remember. And that counter memo of Schiff is there, and it endorses the dossier. So let's not let him off the hook. He played a huge role in Russiagate. He played a central role in Russiagate. He was the person who spread all the stories about the dossier. And of course, he was also the person who played the central role in the second Trump impeachment. This is a man deeply implicated and with his fingerprints all over the scene, if I can put it in that way.
Yeah, he was the key driver of Russiagate. He was the key driver of Ukrainegate. He was the person connected to the quote-unquote whistleblower whose name we cannot even dare to mention on social media, otherwise we will be vaporized. I mean, that is all Adam Schiff. He actually, so after the Danchenko indictment, the arrest, he actually went on The View. A couple days later, he went on The View in order to seek safe refuge, right? You go to The View in order to get some positive press and some positive media around you if you're a Democrat. And so he went on the View to field softball questions. And he got a lot of softball questions. There was one person on The View that was kind of grilling him a little bit. She's kind of the conservative in the group of ladies on the View, and
Conservative
Schiff,
with in quotation marks.
yeah, okay, yeah. She gave him some good
Anyway,
question. Ortegas is her name. Yeah, okay. She gave him some good questions. Fine. I mean, token questions, but she could have grilled him a lot more. Anyway, she basically said, you defended, promoted, you even read into the congressional record the Steele Dossier. That's what Ortegas told Schiff. And Schiff said, he insisted, look, there's a quote, there was no way we could know that the Steele Dossier was phony.
He's only the chair of the House Intelligence Committee. I mean, can I just say, on the very day BuzzFeed published the dossier, the two of us, I remember this, we looked at it. We had a conversation, and I actually wrote an article about it, which appeared on the Duran website, in which I said that this was a clever fabrication. And I actually went through it, and I said, why? And then about a month later, I did an absolutely humongous piece, which you can also find on the Duran website, which I said that the whole Steele dossier outline, the way it discussed things, was absurd, and that the person who drew it up was either profoundly ignorant about the way the Russian government works, because the kind of decision-making process it outlined didn't make any kind of sense, and you then put all that article together, and you constructed, I remember, a sort of diagram pointing out how all, the problems just didn't add up and didn't, make any kind of sense. Now, that was us. That was the two of us. We're not the chair or deputy chair of the House Intelligence Committee. We could see it immediately. I mean, it was just to say, we got this dossier. No reason to believe it wasn't true. I mean, that is ridiculous. That's absolute, complete nonsense. I'm going to say something else. I mean, the point about evidence of this nature is that, what Schiff is saying, and he's a lawyer, remember? He should know about evidence. He's reversing anyway the burden of proof. He said, we got this evidence, so we assume it is true. Assume it is true, because we've no reason to think otherwise. In fact, that dossier made a whole lot of incredible allegations, not just against Donald Trump, but against all sorts of other people, Carter Page, Paul Manafort, Michael Cohen, crook though he was. The allegations in that dossier about him were completely untrue. Various Russian businessmen who are completely unconnected with anything. And you assume those allegations are true because, well, you've no reason to think otherwise. Well, since when do you make that kind of assumption? The assumption always, this is what I've been educated and taught all my life, long before I did any kind of legal training, is that you assume somebody's innocence until their guilt is proved. Adam Schiff is saying, well, I every reason to think they're guilty because this bizarre dossier says so. I mean, that is an astonishing thing for a man who is an attorney, a top-level attorney, and, as I said, the chair of the House Intelligence Committee to say. Now, I'm going to say the straightforward truth. I don't think Adam Schiff cared one way or the other whether the dossier was true or not. I think he was interested in whether or not it was true. I'm pretty sure that if he actually took a step back and thought about it, well, he probably would have said to himself, if he'd done the kind of exercise that you and I did when BuzzFeed published it, he'd have figured out very quickly that it wasn't true, because God help us, it was obvious it wasn't true. But he didn't care, because he was interested in only one thing, which was trying to remove Donald Trump from office and discredit the 2016 election. So he used the dossier to do that, to achieve that. He didn't expect that Trump would fight back, which is what he did, and that the whole thing wouldn't, in the end, pan out quite as he expected. And that's what the whole story, that was the whole nature of his motivations. And I'm going to say something else as well. if what I say is right, that he didn't care whether the dossier was true or not, if the Democrats didn't care whether the dossier was true or not because they were using it as a weapon to get rid of Donald Trump, well, that gives them a motive. I'm not going to take this further. It gives them a motive to bring impeachment proceedings, which is what they tried to do twice, because having used this bogus, phony, false evidence against Donald Trump, they had to discredit Trump in some way, and that meant that pushed them into bringing impeachment proceedings. So that provides, if you think about it, a kind of incentive to bring the impeachment. Because if the impeachment had succeeded, well, let's be straightforward about it, nobody would be looking at any of this today, and the whole Durham investigation would have been closed down.
Yeah, I think that like Schiff is just banking on the fact that this was, 5 years ago and it's just going to, disappear into the memory hole. So he can now come onto The View and say, we had no idea to realize that this was a phony dossier. So, mea culpa, my bad. And I didn't know. What can I say? I didn't know there wasn't a Russian consulate in Miami. How was I going to know that? I mean, he's just kind of betting on the fact that everyone's just going to just move on from it and people will forget. But if you go back to the 2015, 2016, those years, you start to understand that when that dossier was being floated around all of DC, no news agency, no media company wanted to touch it. And we have many media companies and many journalists who hated Trump, but explicitly said we didn't want to touch it because the whole thing read like a bogus document. And it's obvious. You read it and you say this is bogus, it's stupid. No one wanted to touch it. And so now that we pretty much know, I mean, it's the worst kept secret in all of DC that Schiff was the person most likely speaking with the media and feeding information to the media, whether it was Russiagate or Ukrainegate. I wonder, going back to 2015-16, if how much of a role Schiff played in finding a news agency, a media channel, a website to actually run with the dossier, so then everything can move along with the plan of discrediting Trump. I wonder how involved was he from the very beginning, knowing his connection to the media and how he was openly communicating with the media during Russiagate and Ukrainegate. Once again, it's the worst kept secret that Schiff was the person that was leaking. He was going to the bathroom and calling up, media companies and journalists and telling them what to report. I mean, okay, we don't have the concrete evidence, but everyone pretty much knows that was
absolutely,
Schiff.
Absolutely, and his aides were doing the same thing. At least, again, I mean, we don't have the concrete evidence, but that's actually universally what everybody knows and what is believes, and I'm sure it's true. I would add something else, that of course Schiff, like all the congressional leadership of the Democratic Party, knew about the dossier before it was published by BuzzFeed. I mean, they knew about it before the election. And one gets a sense, and this is, as much as we can say, that they were getting extremely frustrated by the media's reluctance to actually publish the dossier. And so what actually happens, it's all very interesting. It's a very interesting scenario, is that you see that the dossier is circulating. There is then in January, I think it was on January the 5th or January the 6th, 2017, this meeting between Donald Trump and the intelligence chiefs to discuss Russiagate. Michael Flynn, by the way, is also there. After the meeting, the intelligence chiefs leave. Comey, who is the FBI director, remains. He shows to Trump a summary of the dossier. It doesn't actually show him the dossier itself, and asks Trump to respond. Trump absolutely categorically refuses to countenance. He says this is all nonsense and lies, which is of course absolutely true. That's exactly what it was. And then a few days later it's published by BuzzFeed. And I said at the time, I'm not the only one who said so at the time. I think it was the great Robert Parry made the point at the time. He was still, I think, alive then. That all looked like an attempt, and we know that Trump thought it was an attempt by the FBI to basically coerce him, blackmail him, if you like, by showing him information of this nature with a threat that it would be made public later. And of course, it was made public later, just a few days later, when it appeared in BuzzFeed, when Trump refused to be blackmailed. Now, can I say that, of course, we don't know what was going on behind the scenes. We don't know who was talking to whom. Perhaps Durham will find out. Perhaps Durham will take an interest and try to find out, as he should do. But I don't believe that James Comey was doing this all by himself. Undoubtedly, he coordinated with the other intelligence chiefs. But surely he would have also, or those intelligence chiefs also, would have coordinated with the administration, which at that time was the Obama-Biden administration. Let's always remember that. And he would also have coordinated with the top figures in Congress, and who at that time was the deputy chair of the House Intelligence Committee, and a person right at the center of the picture, somebody with whom the intelligence community would have been in regular contact. Well, it was, of course, Adam Schiff. So, I mean, it makes the scenario you've outlined with Schiff at the center of the publication makes absolutely complete sense. As I said, one gets a sense of the Democrats deeply frustrated that the media were scared of the dossier and were not publishing it, and engineering through, with the help of someone in the intelligence community, namely Comey, to get it published by first showing it to Trump and then having it published by BuzzFeed.
Yeah, it was a setup. It was a setup. But Schiff is, he really destroyed the United States, didn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've got to understand something about Russiagate. Russiagate is the biggest scandal in American history. It's far bigger than, I mean, Watergate, Teapot Dome, all those things that you've heard about, Americans read about, all of these are absolute nothings. Watergate was a squalid burglary which went wrong, and a bungled cover-up that followed it. This is something that was completely different. It was an attempt first to discredit Donald Trump, to defeat him in an election, and then, of course, it was an attempt to break Donald Trump by running a prolonged investigation against him, one which, let's remember, lasted years and which ended in the prosecutions of all kinds of people, fundamentally innocent people. Now, what makes Russiagate especially terrible is not just that it sought to delegitimize an election, but the success of the people who concocted Russiagate, who were behind Russiagate, in getting the intelligence community, the institutions of the United States government, the law enforcement agencies of the US government to do their work for them. I mean, it is the politicization of intelligence. It is the involvement of the intelligence community of the United States in a partisan political battle, and their active involvement in prosecuting a smear. I mean, that puts it on a different level from everything else. I mean, if you go back to Richard Nixon, he couldn't get the deep state, well, it wasn't perhaps even quite the deep state and quite the way it is today. In those days, he wasn't able to get the FBI and the CIA to do his dirty work for him. They absolutely refused. So he had to set up his own private intelligence agency, the so-called Plumbers Unit, within the White House to do his dirty tricks for him. And that's, of course, what led to the Watergate burglary and the cover-up and the whole thing. But, I mean, the whole thing had a farcical quality because in those days, the intelligence community, the law enforcement agencies, refused to become involved in that kind of political battle. This time they did. They combined forces with the Democrats and the media to discredit a presidential candidate, and when that failed, to try to bring down a president. And that's something that's never happened before in the history of the United States.
Yeah. All right. We'll leave it there. Let's hope Durham keeps digging. All right.
Absolutely. I'll just to finish one thing. One thing that's become obvious over the last few days, and it's a good sign, is that a lot of people are scared. I mean, you get that sense reading the sort of things, this kind of stammering steps that people are taking, the way they're trying to distance and walk away from this disaster, this debacle. One gets the sense that they're scared. We'll see whether they're right to be. I mean, it depends on Durham at the end of the day. And as I said, at the moment, it looks as if he's a real investigator going about this in a real way. But, you know, we've been disappointed so many times. Let's not get our hopes too high up.
Yeah, we're seeing one of the chief architects of Russiagate and Ukrainegate to the hoax, Adam Schiff, running to the View in order to seek cover. That shows that he's very worried.
Absolutely. I completely agree.
All right, we'll leave it there. The Duran.locals.com. You'll find the link down below. ODYSEE, Rumble, BitChute, and SuperU. You'll find all our videos there. And go to the Duran shop, 10% off. Use the code REAL NEWS. Take care.